whose daughter on the autism spectrum loved a particular shirt.
Right,
it was
right.
her
I heard about
comforting
this.
shirt.
Yes.
Particular pattern. They tried giving her different pattern shirts, but this one shirt, this one pattern was the thing.
Right.
And over the years, the mom has had several shirts, but you know, they weren't making the shirt anymore, so she posted, and we've got the picture there on the screen. Thank you, Samantha. This is a Utah mom, Deborah Grisham Skousen. She posted on Facebook and said, here's my daughter, she's on the spectrum, here's the shirt. Does anybody have one of these shirts? Like, do you have it in a garage sale? We need some more of these shirts. Now, it got shared and shared and shared, so the mom has received over 70 of the shirts, and people have offered to send her more to have it turned into blankets and teddy bears and all these kinds of things.
Oh my gosh, are you
serious? How much do we love this? I get goosebumps thinking about the fact that so many people went, well, you know what? I've got one of those. They recognize this is the power of the internet, right?
That's awesome.
So I love it. I love the fact that this mom is going to be able to have this shirt for the daughter, and they're going to be able to turn it into teddy bears and all these other things. But I do think it's worthwhile, not to say, oh, well, you know, she should have just let the t-shirt go. Not that, but in the realm of how can she also start to work on it so that the child isn't completely dependent on just this shirt in her life.
Right.
Because I'm thinking at some point,
right,
you know, when she's 16,
she
may like feel, or the parents might feel like she's being held back by it.
Right.
For now, that's not the decision the family's making, and I support and agree with that. But if they or another family wanted to at some point say, what are the different ways they could work on this to make it okay to be without the shirt?
Absolutely. You know, and like everything else, I mean, first of all, I do agree with you completely. It's such a beautiful thing, like that we're, you know, bringing people together, and it's just amazing. And it reminds me of what we're doing right now at CARD with Louisiana and the all the flooding that's occurring in Baton Rouge and that area, and how like within 2.5 days, 2 days really, Monday, Tuesday, Cardians have raised already over $5,000, which is amazing.
For those of you who don't know or haven't been watching the news, there's so much flooding that's happening in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We just were there.
Yeah.
My son and I were just there at the Baton Rouge CARD office and at the Denham Springs office, and we've been looking at the pictures and recognizing places that we were at that are underwater. And we met so many families and therapists and people who work in the offices there that are just like you and I and everybody else, that they're trying to do their best for this group of kiddos, and everybody has hopes and dreams. And now, in addition to all the things that we're all dealing with on a daily basis, a lot of them don't have a home to go back to.
That's right.
A lot of them don't have clothes. They had to leave with almost no notice. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And somebody from CARD set up a fund that you can donate to if you want, and no amount is too small. But also they're taking donations. If you want the address for either of those two locations, we all have stuff that our kids just outgrew. If you want to put it in a box and send it, you can write to me and I'll give you the address. And if you go on my personal Facebook right now, there is the link to the place to go and make a donation. And also saying if anybody wants to send objects, you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And our Baton Rouge office address is also on our website. That's where we're collecting clothing and food and blankets and whatever. And of course, CARD is matching the donations 100%. So we are, right now, I think the CARD therapists and staff have raised about $5,000, and of course we will match that as well. So
to go to the families.
To the families and staff.
Yes.
We're also giving just free work hours to our staff, because they've lost a lot of work hours because obviously the families are not around. So it's impossible. But but it does show how social media can be so effective to do so much good. And going back to this story, it's an amazing story, and it's just so touching, and it is wonderful. But you're right in that, you know, I guess when I look at autism as a whole, it makes our children somewhat different, right? I mean, a child with autism is somewhat different. And there's two aspects. Whenever anyone is somewhat different, it doesn't even matter if it's a diagnosis of some type or if it's a choice. Let's say people who are choose to have a different gender or choose to have a different lifestyle, whatever it is, when you're somewhat different from the norm, two things have to happen. The norm has to modify itself a little bit to fit you and to accept you. And you have to modify yourself a little bit to fit into the norm. And that's just the way of life. It's not, I mean, both could choose not to.
Yes.
But in both cases, that would be a bad thing. Just imagine if the norm, like the majority of the people in the world decided we are not going to accept gays, for example, as an example, right? We're just not going to accept them. That would be a horrible thing. Same thing as, we are not going to accept individuals with disabilities. They're too different. We're not going to be, that takes you back to, Nazi Germany, really, right? And the other side of it is those individuals, if they said, we're different and we're not going to be part of you, and we need our own set of rules, our own set of laws, we're not even going to, merge with you in any way. And that would be a bad thing as well, right? So both things have to happen for society to continue. So this, is the norm, the larger world, I guess, compromising or giving and accepting that individual and saying, hey, not only do we accept the fact that you have this incredible need for this shirt, but we're going to help you keep that. We're going to support your differentness. We're going to support it by giving this to you.
Yeah.
And now what you're saying, Shannon, which is of course just as important, is how about if we also help this child learn ways to join the norm, right?
And I will say this before we continue, that she doesn't need to wear it at school. So already she's made some accommodations.
Absolutely.
She wears it when she comes home from school, and she wears it to bed for comfort.
Absolutely.
And that's a great thing. That's a great compromise for the age that she is now. But at some point, she may want to move further. And how would we help her to do it?
And this is a very simple thing if you think about it, because realistically, you always have to ask yourself, why do people insist on certain things? Why? What's the reason? Like, why do we do any behavior? I always start with that, obviously, and ABA as a whole always does ask the question, why? That's why we're determining the function. So why is it that she insists on this shirt? At some point in her history, there has been some classical conditioning occurring with this shirt where there's no question, there's not. So either she has had some very extremely positive experience with when wearing this shirt or seeing it, or something reinforcing is associated with this shirt. So it's an important thing for her, and it probably provides a certain level of, as you said, comfort. And most likely, whenever we have an insistence on sameness, whether it be with an object or a routine or anything else, it is usually a anxiety reducing type of thing. So when we insist on going a certain path back and forth to work, let's say, or to school, it's because that is the path that we are familiar with. Familiarity makes us less anxious. Anything new makes us more anxious. And that is why people who have obsessive compulsive disorder will repeat the same thing as a compulsion, because that is calming. Repetition of a particular behavior is calming. That's a given. So what she's trying to do is she's seeking out this shirt because in some ways it calms her and it gives her some level of comfort and so on. Now, before we think about this and figure out what to do with it, let me ask you, is there an item of jewelry that you wear because it gives you a sense of comfort or a good memory, or it brings you luck?
Yeah, see, I'm not a jewelry person.
Okay.
But there are other things that are like that for me.
Okay.
But I'm not a jewelry person for that.
So,
but yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Absolutely. I mean, so like, my husband gave me this, and it's in our culture, in the Iranian culture, and in the Middle Eastern culture, you have an eye, the form of an eye, right? And that is just, it's sort of like prevents harm from coming to you type thing. And it's a complete superstition. It has nothing at all to do with real life. In fact, since I've been wearing with this, a bunch of stuff has happened that's not very good, as you know, the last few weeks. But The truth is, these are ornaments and things that we think are in some way giving us some sense of security. Yes. So what I'm saying is that we all have this.
Yeah. Oh, watching the Olympics, they all had a lucky thing in their duffel bags. Every single one of them.
There you go. And that is what this shirt is. That's what this shirt is. Mm-hmm. Now, if each of us who had something like this, so let's say for me, is it okay for me to wear this? Sure, it doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't affect anything, and that's that. If I lose it, I've lost it, I can buy others that are similar to it if the eye thing is important to me, whatever it is, right? We all move on. But if it gets to a point where if I lose this or if something should happen to this, my life is put on hold, I fall apart, I have meltdowns, to the point where someone who loves me, let's say my mother or someone else, then has to find the exact object for me, then it starts to become problematic because it makes me being happy more difficult. Yeah. It produces the possibility that something this small could take away my happiness, right? And so that's why it would be important for this little girl to at some point reduce the absolute need for this particular object, because we don't want her at any point to be dependent on Facebook users or what's going to happen next now. Like, right, as you said, like when she's 18 or something, what if she can't find? What if nobody has this shirt anymore? What if it doesn't exist? So the recommendation I would have is that you do want to start thinking about ways to modify this, and there are many, many ways to modify this. In fact, the fact that people have sent in so many that you could actually make some sort of blanket is a great thing. I would also make a small object of it. So for instance, I don't know, maybe a little just a little piece like this that has padding in it or something that she could have in her pocket, and make 10 of those, right? And then so she could, no matter what she's wearing, if she wanted, she could take that little piece of that cloth and put it in her pocket. And if you, something as simple as make them smaller, smaller, smaller to the point where it doesn't really matter to her, she will give it up. When it's too small, it won't be, over time, she'll just forget it and it'll be gone. Other things you can do is you can start to generalize it. So you can, if you make a patch, you can put other types of similar material also in the patchwork. So similar pattern, so that gradually over time, the other ones also by association start becoming reinforcing, so that it's not just this pattern, but anything that has flowers on it, let's say, or anything that is pink. I mean, come on, like how many little girls like things that are pink, you know, or red? So you can start to generalize it to other things.
By mixing it with this pattern. Because I think Mom has tried other patterns, but they didn't work, but they weren't with the
They were
the pattern.
Replacements, and she wasn't ready for a replacement. So what you do is, you know, if you're going to make a quilt, you just mix in one other pattern or two other patterns, and this will still be there. And you gradually, over the course of the next year or two, start to, you know, also have other things that have other patterns, but are associated with complete awesome, fun, good times for her. And I guarantee you, over time, she will replace them with other relics and things that, you know, like the rest of us. And actually, you know, when I say jewelry, it's because, of course, jewelry has been for thousands of years, is something that is like this, right? I mean, a lot of us wear jewelry that's very meaningful to us and so on. It's funny because the wedding ring, of course, is also that. It's not at all, it had nothing to do with bonding at all. It's just something that actually was introduced by jewelers. And
but we've associated with it so long.
That's right.
I'm just not, I don't even wear my wedding ring. See, I'm not that.
You're not a jewelry person that much. So, but it's very interesting, and it's very easy to sort of generalize this to regular life. I think it would be good to do it too.
And I think what's great about the reason why I was thinking let's have this conversation is that they've got plenty of time now. Now you've got 78 shirts and lots of time to be working on this. You don't have to get it done by tomorrow. I think Mom was at panic point of, oh no, I don't have a shirt now, and what am I going to do? And if you start, the thing I learned over and over and over again is slowly. Slowly, slowly, slowly. And if we take care of things slowly, it works, and it's not harmful to our kids, and it's not something that produces anxiety. But if we have to do these things overnight, that's when it's hard on us.
That's right.
As parents.
That's right.
Because our kids will have emotions and they'll go through some anxiety, and it's really stressful for us as parents.
And for the kids, because you're
kids.
pushing them through something.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. And I would suggest that you start something now that you have time, as Shannon is saying, and I think it's important and it's easy to do.
And we can all do this. All of our kids have something like this.
And don't worry. I mean, a lot of times, most of us, we give in and we worry when our child cries. It's not a big deal. Don't be scared when your child cries. Think of crying as an expression. If the child had typical development, during their crying, they'd probably be saying stuff like, but this is so unfair, I really want that shirt, stuff like that. And then you would care less about it than you do now. When our kids can't express themselves, we think that when they cry, they're really falling apart. They're not. They're just expressing themselves. So it's not something to panic or worry about. You can actually take your time and think about, like, she's going to be fine. She's going to get over this.
There was a moment when the A Word first started, and I was watching one of the first early episodes of the A Word with my son in the room. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment in which Jack Riley is in the other room and he is crying because they're not allowing him to tip over and watch his trains on the side. There's nothing horrible happening. They're not being abusive. They're just having him sit back up, and he's fatutzed and he starts to cry. And mom is on the outside of the door and she's a mess and she's crying and she's like, I want to go in. I don't know what to do. And she calls a friend and they talk her off the ledge. And I was sitting there watching this and I was remembering those moments. And I was thinking about Bryce Myler talking about sitting outside the door and crying and how hard it is on us to watch our kids do these hard things. And I was having an emotional moment, and here comes my son and he starts watching and he says, why is that mom crying? At this point he was like 8 or 9. And he said, why is the mom crying? And I said, because her little boy is on the other side of the door and he's doing therapy and he's having a hard time. And he said, but that's just, why is she upset, right? We're having this whole, and I thought it was, oh, this is autism, he's not understanding. And I said, well, you know, I used to do that. I used to sit outside your door and cry when you were upset, and I couldn't come in and say something because I needed you to learn. And he said, oh, Mom, I was fine. I was just frustrated.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're frustrated, you cry, but you know, you're okay when you're frustrated. You get frustrated, you're okay when you're frustrated. I was fine.
Yeah.
And I called the mom on the A Word and I said, if somebody could have called me and told me that my kid was going to say this, I would have so appreciated. So I'm calling you to tell you this.
That's so nice.
And she said, thank you, because I will remember that someday he's going to say I was just frustrated.
That's right.
And so I share that with all of you. It's hard, though.
Honestly, it's very, very hard. I look back and I think about Charlie, my little one, you know, who's now 15, and when she was little, she just would not sleep. Like, she refused. And it was tough because I had already gone through my other two, and I'm a behaviorist and I'm a psychologist, and what on earth is going on? I can't get this child to sleep. And I would be wiped out and exhausted sitting outside her room on the floor crying and saying, oh my God, please, you know, and my husband would come and say, are you crazy? Like, you train everybody to how to do this. You need to come and go back to bed, you know? And I'm like, but I can't leave her, and all this sort of stuff. And it's extremely hard. And you know what? She doesn't even remember it.
Right.
She does not even
do.
remember it. Exactly. I do, because it traumatized me.
Yes.
But in her, what she was doing was she was just telling me what's going on with her.
Yeah, exactly. All right, on that note, we're going to take a break. We do have a question coming up about sleep. So if you're like, ooh, how did she make it work? That question is coming up, plus a bunch more. So we're going to take a break and be back with more Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages.
Did you see this last one?
Currently in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism-Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable and recovery from autism is possible. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Grampiche. She's answering your questions in real time, and we're having a really wonderful, good time. Okay, I've got so many questions, but I said we would talk about the sleep. Somebody wrote in and said, hello, Shannon, do you have any ideas how I can get my son to sleep at night and through the night? And since you were just bringing up the fact that you had issues with your youngest daughter, this is a lot of people, and I gotta be honest that a lot of times when you're gonna start a good quality ABA program, and you should be starting a good quality ABA program if you're not already, and we're going to talk more about that in the next hour. But a lot of times we talk about how your child has to get healthy enough to do it, and they have to be well rested enough. And you've mentioned before how important it is that the parents are well rested enough to do it.
Yes.
And so getting that sleep component on board for everybody's sake is
very important.
All important.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of different things about sleep, and it's a very important subject, and I don't want to cut it short, but I'll try to, we actually have some brochures and trifolds that kind of explain all aspects of what to do to get your child to sleep, and we'd be happy to send those out there.
If you want to, just drop me your email and say I want the sleep brochure and give me your address and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, they're very useful. So, with sleep, like anything else, is sort of it very much depends. It's a learned behavior. And we know this for sure because when we have infants, of course, they wake up multiple times a night, and they're waking up. Usually they don't really need anything, but when they wake up, if we get into the habit of giving them food or drink, then they continue to wake up and they never get off that schedule. And if we don't give them food or drink, then generally, unless they're wet and need a diaper change, they will sleep. And actually, that's a really interesting way to look at it, because a parent told me a long time ago, and this goes back to the subject of when our kids cry.
Yeah.
And a parent said to me, we were talking about this whole concept of crying being talking, like crying is a kind of communication. And the mom said to me, and it was a really interesting thing, she said, if you think about it, brand new babies, of course, that's the only way they communicate, right? Yeah. And when it's a pain cry, when it's a wet cry, when it's a hunger cry. And we do. We really
you
learn
do.
that.
A lot of us don't, but they show more and more programs so that we can help to identify.
Right.
I didn't know that.
But for sure, that one thing is natural, like the difference between a pain cry, because it's an extreme pain cry,
true,
versus any other cry. And the interesting thing for me is this mom said to me, she said, you know, with our typically developing kids, we all start out that way. It's just that because they're typical, by the time they hit 1, we don't accept it anymore.
Yeah.
And we're like, enough of this already. You better call me if you want me, or tell me what you want. I'm not coming whenever you cry. But with our kids with autism, we just assume they can't do the same thing. And so we never, and the child could be 5, and we still try to cater to their cry and figure out what it is. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's very interesting. Now, with sleep, it's kind of the same thing. It's, don't try to, there's 2 things, is the antecedent control and the consequence control. That means a behavior occurs, you always try to change the things that occur before it and the things that occur after it in order to change that behavior.
Okay.
So the not sleeping, or let's say a behavior is never a not. So let's say when the child doesn't sleep, they wake up. So waking up or crying during the night, or those types of things that indicate the child is awake, is the behavior we want to change, right? So we would like our child to remain asleep, right? So what can we do before it and what can we do after it to help modify that behavior? Some of the things we can do before it are, we can make sure the environment is quiet. So you want to make sure the room is quiet. There's our kids, because they are very sensitive to sound, you got to make sure that there's certain things. Sometimes I have kids who wake up like because the sprinklers outside go on, and we have to make sure that we deal with that, right? So it's quiet and there are no noises that are regularly waking the child up. Second thing is that it's dark. Darkness significantly impacts the production of melatonin, and so it's very important that it be a dark environment. So get those shades that darken the room and all that sort of stuff is very important. And that, of course, the child is comfortable, right? So they have a comfortable space and so on. And now, and perhaps even give the child a variety of different things that make the child comfortable, like their stuffed animals or whatever it is. Do not give stimulating things. Obviously, we don't want toys in the room that are that generally the child becomes hyperactive with. Those toys, like outdoor toys or musical toys, or toys that have a lot of lights and flashing lights and so on. And so these are some antecedent modifications. Other antecedent modifications are things like, don't give the child a lot to drink after 6 p.m. Let's assume, or even 5 p.m. Let's say 2 or 3 hours before the child goes to bed. Because what you want to make sure is that, you know, you are not provoking the child's bladder becoming active in the middle of the night. You want the child's body and physiology to be comfortable as well. So not too many liquids before the child sleeps. Another thing is, obviously make sure that the diet that you have your child on is not one that causes discomfort. So that would mean you don't want to give your child, and this would apply to children of all ages, but whether it's a baby, you want to make sure the formula you're giving to your infant is something that they can digest well, so that when you lay them down, they don't have gas. If it's an older child, you want to make sure they don't have bloating or, let's say, reflux. All of those things lead to bad sleep, right? So all that is stuff that you have to take care of, and it's all antecedent control. So you do all that. What do you do on the consequence control is, when your child wakes up in the middle of the night, you do not reinforce that behavior by giving the child something to eat or drink. When you pair it with, when you reinforce something with a primary, which is a primary reinforcer being food or drink, it is so hard to break that habit. I can't even tell you. Like, it's incredibly difficult. If at maximum, like, you never should give milk or food in the middle of the night. If you give the child anything at all, it could potentially be water, maybe a little bit, or a pacifier, but not food or drink, because food or drink, the child will automatically, it's a physiological response that it'll trigger, and he'll wake up at 3 o'clock every morning because now he wants something to eat. And that's a pretty bad habit. So you want to make sure that the child is getting enough nutrition on the antecedent side before 5 p.m., let's say, so that they can actually carry through the night. So the child wakes up and cries. What do? you want to make sure that you're not responding just to the crying, so you're not going in every single time the child cries. Now, there's two ways to handle this. One is just completely cut it off, don't go in at all, and you will have 3 nights maximum of the child completely crying like you can't believe, because the child, from the child's perspective, they're like, wait a minute, until now I cried, somebody came and picked me up. But the truth is, as soon as they realize crying is ineffective, they'll stop. And they will sleep through the night and nothing will happen. Now, as a parent who found that to be very harsh on myself and couldn't do that, there are numerous schedules that, you know, they say Ferberize your child. I mean, there's schedules that are specifically for this. So one schedule is that you go in, and when the child cries, you go in, the first time you will comfort the child, just put your hand on the child's back, baby, let's say it's an infant, pat them and tell them to relax, and you'll stay for 15 minutes. Then you go out. Then when the child wakes up again or cries again, you go in, now this time for 10 minutes only, and pat the child and leave. Third time for 5 minutes, and then from there on, the child has to be quiet for a new session to start. If they're not quiet, then you just don't go in anymore. So that's let me tell you, when you do these schedules, it takes longer. The whole thing takes longer. So really this has a lot to do with you being able to cope and not go in. Now, keep in mind, you know everything is taken care of. Also, in this day and age, you probably have a video monitor in there so you can see your child. Most people do now. When I had kids, we only had the sound monitors. We didn't have the video. But the truth is, you can see your child. Your child is just awake. They're not harmed or in any way. I mean, nothing is wrong. Obviously, we're not talking about sick children. When a child is sick, it's a whole different thing. But, you know, there's nothing wrong. So there's no reason to go in. It's just your own response, and it's almost like a reflex. Obviously, you know, when you're nursing, you have the same reflex, right? You start producing milk as soon as you hear your child's cry. But it's a matter of just tolerating and sitting outside. And with the video monitors, it's a lot, much better nowadays, because you can actually see your child. Yes. And you can make sure that they're not hurt in any way.
Right. On some of them, you can see well enough to see that they're still breathing, which is what some of us need.
That's exactly right. You just need, well, I mean, if they're crying, they're breathing. You know?
Right.
Those are the main things. It's really just a matter of not reinforcing on the back end, and then making sure on the front end that you've done everything to help sleep. Now, sometimes if you travel or for a variety of different reasons, your child biochemically might have issues where sleeping is not occurring. You definitely want to check with your pediatrician for sure to make sure there's nothing going on that's preventing sleep. Sometimes our kids have seizures during sleep. That's important to check. And then I am a firm believer in helping children sleep with the help of melatonin. Melatonin is good for you. There's nothing harmful in it. I particularly myself use this product called Tranquil Sleep, which is fantastic. It's melatonin, 5-HTP, which is tryptophan, and theanine. All are very good for you. And so that is very helpful, and it helps your child actually fall asleep fast and stay asleep for a decent amount of time. But with or without that, these techniques do work. It's just a matter of sticking with it.
And I'm just going to say this because I know a lot of times as behaviorists, you guys think, well, duh, and sometimes we miss this as parents. But how important, I was trying a whole bunch of things to get Jem to sleep, and nobody had thought to say to me, and you must stop the napping.
Oh, yes, of course. So important.
Right? Because I was like, well, you know, he's taking that 3-hour nap in the afternoon, but, you know, I can't understand why he's not going to sleep till 2 o'clock. You have to stop the napping, and you have to, everything in our house became this thing because he would be sleepy between 3 and 5. Like, if you left him alone for 3 seconds, he could tip over and fall asleep. So from 3 to 7, we ran his little butt every which way we could. And kept him awake. I had to be constant movement, or he would go to sleep, and then he could go to sleep.
So that's,
but it was ugly sometimes.
That's a very good point. Now, with newborns and infants, we're not saying don't give them a nap. Obviously, you have to stay on a nap schedule, but really when you are past the age of, I think, 1 or 2, you need to really start reducing those naps and understand that the napping obviously will reduce the need for sleep at night.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, we're going to rapid fire some questions here, but I also, a couple of programming notes. Somebody wrote in and said, love your show, but can you increase the volume on the YouTube? And I just want to let you know we've had some sound issues. We believe that we've isolated the problem, so it should not be a problem. But anybody who is having sound issues, both in the live show or during the YouTube, please write to me immediately, because as far as I know, we've isolated the issue. So, having said that, somebody has written in from the SGC office and wants you to know that they are a proud member of the Pooh Research. Stick around for the webinar later on today.
That's awesome.
So that you can find out about that. But they have also written in and said, good morning, we are in need of proper age-appropriate sensory room in our SGC office. The sensory room built for today is for toddlers. How can Shannon help us out? We need help. I want to give you the note that please come to there's something called the CARD PTA. We don't usually talk about it on the show at large. It's called the PTA because it's for parents that are truly amazing. We have a monthly national meeting, and I can talk to you about how you can get more equipment that you want. But you probably have a teen room already. I've been going to the offices, and I've been so excited to see what's happening in the different offices. You probably already have a teen room, and it might be just adding a couple of sensory things to your teen room. That, but I can help you to figure out how exactly you can do that. But you got to come to the PTA. So. Anytime you want to get a hold of me for any reason, s.penrod, PENROD @autism-live.com, and let's get you some teenage stuff going on in your SGC office. Okay, another person wrote in and said, Dr. Doreen, or maybe not even teenager, maybe tween, whatever it is. Let me know what it is. Dr. Doreen, my son, 10-year-old, doesn't like kids, especially younger ones. He says that they are loud and it hurts. He says it hurts my ears. We can't have friends with kids in our house, and we have tried almost everything, using headphones, introducing him to kids very slowly. We also need to have a therapist at our house if a child is coming over, and it can't be any therapist, only one that has control over him. What do you recommend for us to do?
Well, I mean, this is also one of those situations where a lot of our kids, I mean, the minute I heard that the child doesn't like younger kids, before you even said it, Shannon, I knew it had to do with sound. A lot of times our kids have sensitivity to sound, and it's a process of acclimating, I guess, to those particular sounds. That was the auditory training that was occurring back in the early, I want to say like late 90s and early 2000s, you know, the Berard, I think it was called Berard.
Berard, and yes.
I don't even remember the names anymore.
Berard, and actually Tomatis,
and yes.
ARI, auditory.
Yeah, I just don't remember.
We've had people on the show. You can find out more about it on. We've had people on the show.
Auditory integration training is basically this. What it does is it has music, and it's modulated so that certain frequencies of sound come across louder than others. And if they can, I mean, in many cases they couldn't identify the exact frequency of sound that our kids had problems with because the child couldn't tell them. You know how you do an audiogram and you have to like press a button when you hear a certain sound? Our kids couldn't do that. So they had formulated what they called the autism profile. And what it was like music, like, you know, Barry Manilow or whatever. It was all different types of music, and it was just sounded like that because certain sounds were lower and other frequencies were higher. And you would listen to this, depending on which technique you were doing, either once a day or twice a day for a period of 10 days. And then again, Tomatis would allow you to repeat 3 segments. Berard, I think it was Berard, wasn't it?
I think it's Berard.
Berard?
Whatever.
Okay.
Right.
We don't remember now. But they would only allow it one time. But anyway, what it did was it acclimated your hair cells. It activated hair cells in the inner ear that had not been activated. And as a result, the neighboring hair cells in the inner ear would calm down a little bit. So when you have a situation, this is a very real sensory thing that occurs, visual and auditory, is that when certain cells are very active, the ones next to them aren't. And if you can try to deactivate the ones that are hyperactive, the other ones kind of grow and become all, so then your hearing and your vision becomes normal, like ours, which is like human beings have sensitivity to certain frequencies of sound, and we're all pretty much the same. So this type of training would help your child acclimate to sounds. And you can try to do this yourself. Like you could start with a very, very low, just get a recording of the sound of children, the sounds that bother him, and play it on a very low volume in the background. And then every day, over the course of 10, 20 days, increase the volume a tiny bit so that he acclimates to it. And I promise you, he will become used to it. But he has now associated that sound which bothered him to little children. So it'll be a whole different thing teaching him that when the next, he'll easily get over the sound problem. But then when he sees a child, he'll immediately, even if the child is completely silent, he'll immediately resist that because he has associated it with that prior painful experience. So you will need to then also, for instance, on TV or videos or so on, have children playing and then also bring children, but in a very quiet environment so that he realizes children are not always associated with that painful experience. And then that's how you do it. It's basically generalizing and getting him habituated to this fear that he's developed of this harsh sound, frequency sound for him.
And I just wanted to tell people, if you're interested in finding out more about this particular type of therapy, we had Kimberly Hurwell-Hewitt on the show talking about this AIT, auditory integration therapy.
That's right.
And she does it here in California, but she will fly to wherever you are. She gets a pocket of children together where they can do that type of therapy. And it can be expensive, but there are several different funding sources that will give grants for it, including the United Children's Health Fund gives grants to be able to do it.
That's awesome.
So, but you can, if you search through our YouTube, you can find Kimberly Hurwell-Hewitt, and it's Kimberly with a K-H-Y. I'm also friends with her on Facebook, so you can connect with her through me on Facebook as well. But this is what she does. She's an amazing woman.